Thanks, everybody. I'm Ed McFarland, for those of you who don't know me. And just to make sure everybody's still awake this early, if you've been around for a few years, you would realize that this actually isn't the second annual, it's the fourth. So, you can't, it's an imperfect world, you know what I mean? So I want to thank everybody for coming. This lectureship was made possible from Molly and her crowd, who made the donations possible. Vicki organized things and got us the food, and Gail's done a lot of the AV stuff, and also my fellows here in the front row, they always help me in times of need when it comes to computers. So you might ask yourself why there's a professorship, lectureship rather, for me. Being a redneck from Kentucky, I always tell people, being from Kentucky, I'm lucky to speak English. And I do have that thing, that you get from head hits, but I can't remember what you call it. And also, as you also know, and probably Dr. Rice, our guest, knows, the one bad thing about football is it sort of teaches you to use dirty words a lot. And so I've been on, PSN watch for a while. So the reason we have this lectureship actually is in part due to just one patient who finished funding it, or had the inspiration to fund it. 65-year-old guy with bilateral severe degenerative arthritis of both shoulders. He couldn't really reach the top of his head. And so we did his left total shoulder in 2007 and his right total shoulder in 2009. And here he is afterwards, very happy camper. And he didn't want a lectureship named after himself, but as a result, because he funded it, we're now cursed with the McFarland lectureship. I've just probably figured 50 years from now they'll change the name. But anyway, I want to thank all those who contributed. There wasn't just him, but a lot of different people. And like Mort Goldberg helped us out, and everybody knows Mort. And so I want to thank everybody else. The thing that's unique about this talk today is the podium is going to be shared by 3 people from Kentucky. It's a good demonstration that some of us actually make it out. The state is really small. It's only about 3 million people. And I grew up in the great metropolis of Paducah. It's a population of 25,000. When I was there, it was about 50,000, so it's getting smaller, but it actually has some buildings. And this picture, believe it, I put this picture in for Dr. Rice. This is me in high school. I was a defensive safety performing this flawless tackle, I must say, right here. And, of course, it's not good to knock the crap out of people anymore because you get a flag, but in those days you could pretty much do what you wanted. Also, our second person who's going to introduce Dr. Rice is Alex Johnson, who is from Owensboro, who, oddly enough, was one of our big rivals in football. And I'm glad to say that we beat them, too, on our way to a state championship. So he's actually now from a bigger city than me. And then Dr. Rice himself actually is from Fort Thomas, so he's the ultimate redneck of the crowd. And but it's just a good sign that we have the Kentucky thing going here today. So we'll have Southern lessons in terms of verbiage and grammar later. But after today, if you can talk Southern, you'll certainly be ahead of the game. So Alex, if you'll come introduce our speaker. And again, thanks everybody for coming.
All right. I'm Alex Johnson. I'm a third-year resident, for those of you who don't know me. So I first met Dr. Rice in 2007 in the spring when I was in his leadership fitness class. Now, I was really excited when I found out I was in the class because it was the most coveted class at Georgia Tech, and it would fill up, like the registration would fill up really quickly, so I was glad I had it. But it was a small-knit group of students. We'd meet once weekly, and Dr. Rice would bring in speakers to talk to us. And the speakers would range from anywhere from the president of the institution at the time, which was Wayne Clough, and he would go on to become the secretary of the Smithsonian, to legendary football coach Bill Curry, and to nationally known business leaders like Bud and Julius Shaw. It was my duty the one week to introduce a guest speaker, and it just so happened it was the then athletic director, Dave Brain. So today it's my distinct honor and privilege to introduce another Georgia Tech athletic director, Dr. Homer C. Rice. So Dr. Rice's story, as do so many legends, began in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. And growing up, he excelled as a multi-sport athlete. He would find at an early age, though, that his true passion was for coaching. Now, he started his coaching career in Tennessee, but he soon returned to the Bluegrass to coach at Fort Thomas Highlands High School. Now, I first felt the impact of Dr. Rice as a high school football player in Kentucky, because Fort Thomas Highlands was a premier high school football program in the state and rivaled many places in the nation. At the end of almost every year of my high school career, I could count on Fort Thomas Highlands to be the state champion. And this had a lot to do with Dr. Rice and his legacy there. He had a 102, 9-7 record during his coaching tenure. While coaching high school football, he also developed the triple option offense. Now, for those of you who aren't versed in college football, the triple option, developing that is like developing the total knee replacement in orthopedics. It completely revolutionized the game and was used throughout all of college football at the time, and even now, ironically, at Georgia Tech and at Navy. So his prolific offenses and success in high school, it promoted him to the college ranks, where he was offensive coordinator at Kentucky and at Oklahoma, and then as a head coach at Cincinnati. His offensive innovations caught the attention of many, including legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant. For much of the 70s, he spent time as athletic director at North Carolina and at Rice University. At the end of the decade, he returned to coaching to coach the Owls, and then he was invited by NFL icon and pioneer Paul Brown to coach the Cincinnati Bengals in 1978. In 1980, to much dismay of Paul Brown, Dr. Rice left the NFL to take the helm at the Georgia Institute of Technology as athletic director. Now, despite his illustrious coaching career, it was his time at Georgia Tech that would define his legacy. Now, Georgia Tech was the owner of the most lopsided victory in college football history, 222-0. It was once a storied and proud athletic program. But by the time Dr. Rice had arrived in 1980, it had fallen into disarray. By the time he left in 1997, Georgia Tech possessed an NCAA championship in football, 9 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances in basketball, including the Final Four, 13 consecutive NCAA appearances in baseball, including a World Series appearance, and then top athletic performances in golf, and volleyball, and track and field. Now, it was hard as a student in Georgia Tech to really take 2 steps without seeing the impact of Dr. Rice. Before I'd even enrolled, I interviewed at the Bill Moore Student Success Center, which was envisioned and championed by Dr. Rice. And my sister would later have her wedding reception in that same building. I swam in the Olympic pool that Olympic athletes competed in 1996. And this was only made possible because Dr. Rice had championed Georgia Tech during the 1996 Summer Olympic Games to have them hold many of the events. Now, even with the immense success on the field, Dr. Rice will be first to tell you that it was his work off the field of which he is most proud. The Total Person program was developed by Dr. Rice at Georgia Tech to promote a balanced life, including academic excellence, athletic achievement, and personal well-being. He envisioned a system for student athletes to help them reach their greatest potential in all aspects of life, so that when an athlete had thrown her last pitch or caught her last pass, that they would be ready to face the world with the same confidence and excellence that they did on the field. The concept was applied throughout college athletics and served as a model for the NCAA Life Skills program that was implemented throughout all 1,200 membership institutions. Personally, I would not be standing here today if it were not for the skills and values I learned in the Total Person program as a freshman football player at Georgia Tech. Now, for those of you who know me, you won't be surprised that one of my favorite things of taking part in Dr. Rice's class was that every week he would treat us to a banquet-style dinner. Now, the food was great, but the conversation was even better. And I remember one time I was sitting there with Dr. Rice, and I was talking to him about his coaching career. And I asked him what was the most intimidating place he had to play as a visiting coach. And without hesitation, he said, LSU. And I was thinking to myself, I asked him why, thinking that, it's going to talk about how loud and rowdy the fans were and everything. But his answer surprised me, and it still makes me grin. He said, it's because they make you walk past that live tiger on the way out to the field. But that's the way that Dr. Rice is. He is an honest man, he's a kind man, and he's a truly a good man. The McFarland Lecture has come to recognize those who have made immense contributions in their field while also maintaining incredible balance in life. And Dr. Rice epitomizes this. He's a devoted husband, father, and a dear and loyal friend to many. And he has graciously spent his life teaching others how to achieve that same balance and fulfillment in their own lives. So, Dr. Rice, we are truly honored to have you here today. Welcome to Johns Hopkins, and go Jackets.
Now, if Maurice can get us back, he's a magician. But Alex was a fine student. You did get an A, didn't you, in my class? One of our fine student athletes at Georgia Tech. And I hope you won't blame Dr. McFarland and Dr. Fickle and others that had me here today. My performance. I just hope it's worthy of their asking me to be here today. But that introduction, my gosh, you know, at one time I was in Who's Who, and now it's Who's He. So thank you for bringing back some of those old things. But I do want to mention a person, Melvin Fenimore. You've probably never heard of this man or know him. I met him on a flight recently. And we began talking, and I don't know how we got into discussion, but I told him I would be here this day, and amazingly, he's going to be speaking to a group in Cleveland at the same time, a group of medical people in Cleveland. And he said if I would mention his name here, that he would mention my name later. You know, my specialty in coaching was quarterbacks. I was fortunate to develop 4 All-American quarterbacks in my college career. And I had an All-Pro with the Bengals in Anderson. And I'd meet with them every day. It'd be right after lunch. I'd be a little sleepy and everything. So we'd always start our meeting with a cadence. Excuse me. Didn't mean to wake up. And they would clap. So I like to see this group. You're the most intelligent people in the world. And I'm here, fortunately, to speak to you today. And I want to try it out with you. Let's try that again. I never get applause at the end, so I like to work that in. So what I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes is positive leadership. And developing a life plan, your personal life blueprint. And I have some books. I hope most of you got a book. I call it Leadership Fitness. Are you fit to be a positive leader? And it kind of goes on that way. But if you didn't get enough books, I'll send more. It's my silent ministry. I've given over 60,000 copies of this book. And the feedback has been unbelievable through the years. And as Alex knows, I was elected one year as the most popular professor on campus. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with that dinner I gave you a week or not, but that might have had something to do with it. But anyway, and but the feedback. This is at least 200 colleges and universities across the country uses their text, the class they teach in the college work. I was asked by the NCAA years ago to put together a program for all student athletes about the life skills that they could develop before they leave there so they'd be a great citizen when they left us. And as time went on, we get the feedback from that. We call it the CHAMPS program, Challenging Athletes' Minds for Professional Success. So that's how it all become nationally. It's in Japan, it's in other states, Canada, and other countries, and so it's going on that way. So, and also I had a paper I sent out. Everybody have a copy? Most everybody. If you want to follow this, do we have enough copies to go around? you want to follow this, as I go through this quickly, see, this is a 15-week course. And I have a few minutes to give it just the highlights of it. So we're trying to develop young people who become positive leaders in whatever field they go into. So anyway, we'll start with that. I did a little research on this group, and I found that you scored 100%. So cheer for yourself. You're a great group of people. I want to make sure I get that before I go anywhere to see what kind of group I'm going to entertain. So, but my life, of course, was sports. I love to play sports. I love to coach it and being a part of it. And so from that point on, I developed this program through my career. And the funny thing how I grew up, my father lost his parents when he was 9 years old. He lived in the southeastern Kentucky, and he went to an uncle, lived in the barn. That's where his home would be until age 16. He self-educated himself. He'd earned money to buy book after book, and he went. I had a scholarship to Brill College. Remember the little Brill College in Kentucky? And he graduated from there with high honors. He goes on to Syracuse, Columbia University, and Boston Theological School, where he got his Ph.D. there in the Vine. But he taught me a lot of things about loving all people, regardless of race, creed, color, whatever. To love all people and not to judge anyone, because that'll be handled by divine power. He became a Methodist minister, and that meant we moved every 4 to 6 years, all over Kentucky. But anyway, he taught me so many things that my life became from what he had taught me. So I'll just run through some of these things. And my career started, of course, as a football coach, and did that for 27 years, as Alex has already mentioned. And the man up in the corner here is Paul Brown, who hired me back for the Bengals. I met him at Great Lakes Naval Station when he was coaching the team there. This is in the 40s, 1940s. And from there I went to the South Pacific Theater, the Philippines, and Corregidor, Bataan, that area. And don't talk too much about it, but that was my life. 17-year-old, I joined the Navy after my senior year of football at the Highlands High School. And I got my degree early and left for the Navy in World War II, and I was there the last 2 years of the war. And didn't say much about that, but I met Paul Brown when he was coaching at the Great Lakes. And I was in every sport. And another thing is, when I came back, I'd signed a grant and aid with Georgia Tech, of all places. And I was being recruited by Indiana and Tennessee and Miami of Ohio and schools like that. And I came back and I called the people at Georgia Tech, and they said, we'd like for you excuse me, go to a prep school, Baylor Prep School in Chattanooga. It was a military school at the time. I'd had enough of militaries. So I decided I would go back home and think about it. Well, the coach who recruited me at University of Indiana came by my home. He was going to become the coach at Little Center College in Danville, Kentucky. So I just get in a car and go with him. And that's how I ended up at Center College. And going from there. But the interesting thing on the quarter system, I played in an all-star game as a catcher in baseball. And Frank Rickey, Branch Rickey's brother, picked me up, and I signed a contract with the old Brooklyn Dodgers. They're now, of course, the L.A. Dodgers. And I went off to camp, and who was there but Jackie Robinson? We became personal friends, and that was one highlight of my life. But so I come back, and I start my coaching career. And what you need, of course, in your career is your family support, trusted friends. And then I became a director of athletics at North Carolina and also Rice. I had to go to Rice University. They named the stadium for me. So, and then, of course, Georgia Tech, and I'm still there. I became an adjunct professor. You people who are adjunct professors, you understand what that means? No pay. No pay. And then I began the class that Alex spoke about, Leadership Fitness. It had a big notebook. Remember all the things I fed you throughout all that. We went from there. And this is what keeps me going. What those kids said, we will probably forget many of our class assignments from Georgia Tech. But Leadership Fitness will carry with us the rest of our lives. That keeps me going. Thank you. And I learned a leader has to start it, but it ends up with we because the team does it. And this is about what I did for the program, putting it together. And so we talk about the two different leaders. Now, there's a lot of different styles in leadership, but there's really only two types of people that lead. One's a negative and one's a positive. So we talk about the negative leader. They're all the bad things. And they have success at times, but at some point in time, they'll harm the rest of the people that they work with at some point. So we go on to the student-athlete program I talked about and how we put it together. Wait a minute, going the wrong way here, excuse me. And then the positive leader, that's the person we want to be. If you'll take my book and go through that and develop your life blueprint, then you will become this person. And I want to really commend you for what you do. I really think you are the greatest people on this earth. What you do for other people is unbelievable. And I admire you, I believe in you, and I thank you for all you do for all of us. So we talk about the difference between negative and positive leaders. And the word positive, of course, has different meanings, but in our program, this is what we live. I'm going pretty fast because time is of the essence here. And it worked for anyone, whatever group you might be in. I see I have any medicine here. So it works for anyone, any group of people, if they'll undertake this. I'll never forget Darrell Royal, the great football coach from the University of Texas, once said, if the games isn't important, why do we keep score? And I thought about that as an individual. If our life is important, let's keep score. And that's what this book and program is about. You're keeping score of yourself, what you're doing, how you're leading, and what you become. And thinking is a great thing, how we think. You know, we become what we think about. It's that simple. And so I developed, through the years, a positive leadership program through how we think. I'm going through it pretty fast. And, you know, I understand we have some neurosurgeons here today about the brain. I studied under a man named Dr. Brigham at Stanford University. I was there to coach the East-West game. Everything from me came through sports to somebody else, something else. And this man, Dr. Brigham at Stanford, taught me a lot of things about the brain. And I put together a very simple program. And he couldn't believe it. He said, you simplified this thing, and here I go and write books and books about it and teach it and so forth. But anyway, we have a human computer. It works the same way as a computer always have. And that, we have the same thing. It's inside of us. And here's the man. How he demonstrated convincingly the direct correlation between what the mind visualizes and what a person achieves. And we find that the brain has two minds. One conscious, that's our objective imagination, and one the subconscious, our subjective imagination. Excuse me, let me get just a little water here. It's early, you know. So, how does it work? Well, our thoughts.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now better? Okay. Okay. Our thoughts. How we think. We become what our thoughts. That's the way it works. Now that goes into the subconscious, and it's recorded just like a regular recorder. And thoughts come out, and from there are actions. Sometimes we'll do something and say, why in the world did I do that? You couldn't help it. You'd actually program yourself to do the things you do. So we go on from there. And so by controlling this action, we have a negative thought. I call it the attitude technique. Change that thought. Take 1 minute. Delete that thought. In 1 minute, change it to a positive thought. And over a time of period, that'll go on into your subconscious, because the subconscious doesn't know the difference, doesn't care what you put in it, whether it's real, imagined, or whatever. It accepts what we put into it. And from that point, the positive thoughts come out, and then we have the positive actions. It's that simple to work. It takes time and time and time to do this. So you can become that positive person if you will change your thinking to be that person. So that's the program. I call it the attitude technique. And I think about the time trying to think this thing through about if we took a board about six inches wide and put it out in the hall where we all could walk the length of that board, about 50 feet long. Most of us in this room could do that. But let's put it up there across 2 tall buildings, and we'll go up on the roof and walk across it. Because we have the same mind, the same muscles as we did on the ground. But what are we going to do? Well, most of us, I know I would, I'd be thinking of falling. I couldn't possibly do it. So just an illustration of how it works. And of course, all the great philosophers have said things that motivate us, and I use a lot of my work through my faith. I'm a strong believer in my faith. And once we start, we never give up, never deviate from that. Failure is a person that gives up trying. You only become a failure when you stop giving. And I think about Babe Ruth back in the early years. I was born in 1927. That's the year he had 60 home runs, but he struck out more than anybody else. But he kept on swinging. And Jane Crowley, of course, she was an American journalist. She founded the only women's club. When they wouldn't let her in the men's club, she founded her own club. She kept after it until she got it. And Vince Lombardi, most people don't realize it, but he wasn't even a head coach for most of his career. And he becomes the head coach of the Packers and go on. And Amelia Earhart, she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. And Albert Einstein actually flunked courses in math. Alex, he probably did that at Georgia Tech. Yeah, a lot of people did. But I'll never forget the story about Dr. Einstein. He came to this country in the 1930s, and the chauffeur would drive him around to speak. That's before television, of course. So nobody knew what he looked like. And the chauffeur said, Dr. Einstein, I've heard you speak so many times, I could do your speech for you. And he said, that's right. He said, I'll tell you what, these people don't know what I look like. We go to this next place. You speak. He took the chauffeur's cap, put it on, and sat in the back. And so he did, verbatim, he gave a speech, exactly like Dr. Einstein. Then they had the Q&As, the questions and answer session. Somebody asked about more on the relativity of sorts, and he said, that is so simple. Even my chauffeur back there can answer that. But we go on, and I like Thomas Edison. They talk about he failed 14,000 times in developing the incandescent light, but he said, no, I just found 14,000 ways it didn't work. And he went on from there. And I had Archie Griffin played for me at the Cincinnati Bengals at Ohio State. He goes to Ohio State. He wasn't very big. He didn't have the great speed that most running backs have. And all of his buddies said, don't go to Ohio State. Archie says, you're too small. You won't get to play. Go to a small college or something like that. And he went there. He walked on. And still today, he's the only two-time back-to-back Heisman Trophy winner. By the way, Heisman was our first football coach at Georgia Tech, just for your information. So if we never quit, we never fail. View your life in terms of not in failure, but only in degrees of success. And there's Darrell Royal keeping score. And what he said, if the game isn't important, why do we keep score? So the keeping score chart of your life, as you go through each day in the book, keeping score and see how you do on that. Another thing about my father. When did I start in this? I was 12 years old. He gave me this book for my birthday when I was 12 years old. I'll get it up right here. Entitled, I Dare You. William Danforth was the author. In this book, he was probably the first person to have goals to set, and in every part of our life, the whole person. And I got the idea of the total person from that. And I did this. At age 12, I started. And it took me a lot of places. So that's a little book. You can still get this in print somewhere. They used to give this to high school seniors for their relationship with the school and so forth at the time. But that's what really got me started. So I'm 89 this month, so that means I've been working a lot on this program, so I should know a little something about it. I dare you. There's another man named Paul J. Maurer that helped me quite a bit. He was, he was in the insurance business. He was the world's top salesman, and he developed the first motivational programs we put on tapes and cassettes at that time in 1960. And I met him at the top insurance people. I took on to have money for my family as a young high school coach. I sold life insurance part-time, and I lucked out and sold $1 million for this one company. So I was a member of the $1 Million Round Table. I had to borrow a tux from somebody, go to Chicago for the dinner, and I sat next to this man. We became close friends, did some writing together. But he had over 50. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he has over 52 companies. He was a billionaire, and we became close friends and developed a lot of information from him. Change. This is an interesting subject because my first job, when I finished college, I wanted to be a head football coach. I had a lot of offers to coach different people at all levels. I wanted to be a head coach. I only got one offer. In fact, it's the only job I ever applied for in my entire life. At Wartburg, Tennessee. Has anybody ever hear of Wartburg, Tennessee, or been there? Didn't think so. I only had 76 people live there, and I didn't think you might not be one. So. But anyway, I take on the head job. I didn't realize that when I got there, I was not only the head coach, I was the coach of every sport, the only coach of each school. And I had 14 players on my team. Now, you know, if you ever watch football coaches, they're always counting to make sure they have 11 on the field for the kickoff, punt return. Remember that, Ed? You always make sure that you had 11 on the field. I didn't have that problem. I looked at the bench. I had 3 on the bench. I knew I had 11 on the field. But the biggest problem I had was I didn't have enough equipment for these 14 players. It just so happens that one of my players' father was the warden of the prison nearby, 9 miles away, Petros Prison. And so he said, my dad had a football team at the prison. And he said, I know they still have uniforms there, so I bet he'd let you borrow them. So he drove me out there in his little truck, and I met with the warden. And I asked him if I could use his equipment. He said, yes, I'll let you have the equipment, but I want to start a team again. If you'll coach the prison team, then you can have the equipment. So I didn't have a choice. I had to coach at 6 o'clock in the morning. I would meet with the prison team. Now, it ended up, that was one of my best coaching jobs. Just think of this, all home games. Didn't have to send the towels back or anything like that. And absolutely no problems from the alumni. In fact, when they came back, I'd put them right back in the lineup. I became close friends with the sheriff of that community, and I'd hear the siren. I said, I hope he picks up a good tight end for me. But there was one player on that team, the meanest, most vicious man I've ever known, and they said he'd never get out of prison. He was such a bad guy. And so in the morning, one morning I pulled him up and said, I have the job at the high school, and I can't be here every morning, so we're going to elect a captain to take charge when I'm gone. Now, this is the days when they had the chains, and they had to unlock those chains, so the prisoners could work out at the football field. And so he steps forward and says, "I'm the captain." I said, "Yes, sir, you're the captain." And later on, he said that he wanted to see one of my games. He'd never seen a football game. I said, "Well, the warden never let him out." But he went on to say the warden believes in God. So if you'll ask him, he'll let me go. I didn't understand his thinking on that, but I did ask the warden. He thought about it. He said, "Yes, I'll let him go." So he comes to the stadium. They said, "We'll send him down in the armored truck. He'll have to wear his uniform, the uniform of the prison, which is a horizontal black and white stripes, a little cap." So he arrives at the field, and they said, they sent down the rifle team to be around just in case he tried to run away or something. So he's on the sidelines, and I gave him my jacket so he could put it on up. He's too conspicuous on the sideline. And so he would walk back, and the players would come off the field, and he'd listen and listen. I'll never know what changed that man's life. Completely changed him over. He was later paroled. He ended up in the state of Florida. Became a very successful person, a leader in his church, his community, business, and everything. And I go on, and I would keep up with it from time to time because that was an inspiration to me. And so as time went on, I'm later coaching the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football. How many of you remember Howard Cosell? He had some derogatory remarks about my coaching ability at that night game. The next morning, I hear from my old friend. He said, "Coach, I'm coming out of retirement. There's going to be one less sportscaster." I don't know what happened, but 3 weeks later, we're playing in Oakland Raiders. Coach Madden, the Oakland Raiders football team, on Monday Night Football, kid. You wouldn't believe the kind things Howard had to say. But change, if he can change, anybody can change, no matter what level you are or where you're going. And you need a plan of action everywhere you go. I think of the 2 hikers in Montana up in the Rockies, and they had their packs on their back, and they're walking, and they see a grizzly. And immediately the one guy takes his pack off, gets his running shoes off, putting his shoes on. His friend says, "You know you can't outrun that grizzly." He said, "I don't have to. I just have to outrun you." So I always have a plan. Time is catching me here, but during my career as a Navy person in the Philippines, we were trying to get equipment to food and whatever with trucks. We drive over the Zigzag Pass in Bataan, trying to get as close as we could to Manila, to our troops there. And we get to a certain point, and we were told when we reached that point that we were attacked by a group, don't come back to the base. In other words, don't bring them to the base. You have to go on and do something else. So we began calling that the point of no return. So what I say yesterday or what I did a few days ago, I can't change it. I have to go on. Go on. You can't go back. And I always remember that every day I wake and I think of that point of no return. You have to go on. So we plan the future. We can't change the past, but we can correct what we did from the past. But we live now. We go and act now. Go from there. And the total person is made up of these things: a positive self-image, seeking optimum health, achieving career success, and reaching financial independence. Then we have a goals program where you set up the goals to accomplish whatever it is you want in life, and then you develop a high purpose. My high purpose has been this program: giving, giving, giving. I don't receive it. I don't accept any funds for it, and because it's my life, my silent ministry, I call it. And Ed, you said stop at 15 till? Keep going. All right. I talked to you about my father. He taught me to be a giver, not a grabber. Down in South America, the scientists there have a way they want to work with monkeys. And I thought this was a good illustration. So they put up a barrel of bananas, and the monkey will reach in there and grab the bananas. Now, the hole's not very big, just big enough to get his arm, so he can't get the bananas out. But he won't turn loose. And I thought about that he's a grabber. So my dad did say, you'll recognize the grabbers through the years, the people that take. They never get. You be a giver. And that's been my life. And be a good listener. I once had a person come in my office, and they were looking around, and I was talking to them. I said, do you want me to tell you what I really think of you? And that kind of got their attention. But anyway, be a good listener. Dr. Ken Cooper became my close friend. We spoke somewhere together years and years ago, and he's helped me quite a bit in my fitness program. And financial independence, I have just one message on that, so I can work this thing out. Maurice is a magician. Maurice, if this works, he'll get a lot of credit for it.
I'm Stanley Johnson. I've got a great family. I've got a 4-bedroom house in a great community. Like my car? It's new. I even belong to the golf club. How do I do it? I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. I can barely pay my finance charges.
What did I do wrong, Marie? Anyway, stay out of debt. That's my message. There's good debt and bad debt. And this is a guy that, I wish you could see the pictures. It's, wait, no, it didn't work that either. Well, just probably fouled this all up on that end. Anyway, here are the 7 steps of your 7-year goal. Make a commitment, write it down. Set a target date, put the ingredients, what's it going to take to accomplish what it is. Giving, you have to give before you receive. Visualization, always use the Lawrence Chadwick story. And belief and expectancy, and I have a positive prayer. And this is interesting. Over 90% of your mental life is subconscious. That's your human computer. So use it well, and you'll become the person you want to be. And high purpose. You all remember Madam Curie and how she and her father actually gave their life in developing the radiation that we have today. And my English teacher back in high school, she asked us one day to fill out the name of the person who's had a profound positive influence in your life. And then she went on to say, 25 years from now, if this is put up about your life, how would you answer that? Only when you help and guide others, you will achieve the true happiness. They may forget what you did or said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think this is this group, and I think you have given your best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. We've time for a few questions. I should mention that we typically hand the check over at this point, but Dr. Rice has asked that the honorarium be given to his foundation for continue to develop this program. But we really appreciate you coming. So, got time for a few questions. Anybody?
See, I did it.
Well, I guess if there's no questions, we'll get done a little early, but there's a great book called The Mind of the South by a guy named Cash. Back in 1939, 35, I think it was written, and it was one of the first sociologies of the South. And one of the things he said about Southerners, because the education program in the South was a little different than in the North, was that Southerners are basically stupid. And the second thing he said was that a little controversial, that part, but the other thing he said is, Southerners, they don't always talk right at you, but they'll always tell you a story, So I think his talk demonstrates one of the problems of being in the South is it's hard to get people to the point. So Alex, of course, told some good stories. And the third thing is, it's real important, is, I don't know if everybody noticed this, but the two of them both said the state of Tennessee is Tennessee. You know, so it's important that if you're going to say Tennessee, you got to say it right. The other thing too is, if you're going to talk Southern, every word has 2 syllables, right? So it's right, might, coulda, woulda, you know, that kind of thing. So nothing else. You learned how to talk Southern here today. And anybody have any questions? He has, actually, one thing he didn't mention is he has 4 great-grandchildren, so that's a pretty good accomplishment. Works out every day at 5 o'clock in the morning, so once a coach, always a coach. And it's been a real honor to have him speak with us today. So thanks, everybody. I think there's still food, and thanks again.